All right, everybody. Good morning. It's Bernard Nomberg. It's Tuesday, 10 o'clock Central. It's time for another weekly episode of Nomberg Law Live. And I'm so happy to have a colleague, a friend, an adversary, and so much more as my guest today, local attorney Wes Hughes. Good morning, Wes. Thanks for joining us today, bud.
Good morning, Bernard, and happy birthday. Happy birthday, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. I will not allow that oversight of calling me by my younger brother's name to derail our conversation.
We lump you guys together.
And as we should be, but we're going to talk about a topic today that is really just so close to our hearts, really more specifically our stomachs. We're talking about Birmingham's food scene. And while Wes is known being a tough litigator and attorney for all these years, those who really know him as a foodie. And that's why I've got Wes on here. We're not talking about the law today. That'd be a snooze fest after about 2 minutes. But Wes,
two minutes would be the extent of my knowledge on the law. So
that's right. That's right. At least
finish
for today. But we could talk as long as we want about Birmingham's food scene. And I've been here since the mid 90s. And Wes, I know that you've been in Birmingham quite a while. But frankly, I don't know if it's still an unkept or unknown secret about how good Birmingham's food scene is. So let's start with just kind of your observations, and then we're gonna hit into it.
I'll talk till you stop me. I guess you've got to take Birmingham's food scene back to the immigrant communities that came in the early 20th century. And I think, without question, the Greek community has led the food scene in Birmingham. I grew up going to the smokehouse in Nicky's West and the ubiquitous Hansis family that fed me through those years back in the early 80s. You go through and they kind of adopted the Southern food way. But you would go down that steam table line and you'd see a few Greek dishes thrown in there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you'd get to the end of the line and there was banana pudding. So you ate that. But
always.
Yeah, I told somebody, the other day, if it came to be my last meal, I would probably go to the smokehouse and have a meat and three with some banana pudding. But it's evolved and certainly, the scene completely changed in 1982 when Frank Stitt opened Highlands Bar and Grill. And from Highlands Bar and Grill and all the people he trained and all the people that worked there, including Chris and Chris DuPont and Chris Hastings and those guys, it's just exploded into a farm to table, really a hot spot on the map. So it's a great experience, and we talked about some places that we really like, and there are too many to name.
Yeah.
I think it equals about 5 blocks of Magazine Street in New Orleans, but there are food meccas in the United States: New York, San Francisco, New Orleans. But on that second tier, Birmingham is great, and you won't find a better place or more accessible place than here.
Yeah, I was going to say, how many of the different either travel or food network type shows that you've seen over the last almost 10 years now, which have featured Birmingham in some of its restaurants, whether it's Eagle Restaurant out at the Sipco, where it's that brick or cinder block, and you got to pay cash, and you're going to be out the door if you're like the 4th person in line. Places like that are just flying under the radar, but have been here for 50, 60 years.
Right.
Then, like you said, Frank and Chris, those restaurants that are so well known, Hot and Hot, Ovenbird, and we could go on and on, Cafe DuPont. But Birmingham is not a barbecue town anymore. Now, granted, you can get some fantastic barbecue here, but Wes, I love when I'm at restaurants maybe striking up a conversation with people who sit next to us or near us. Where are you from and what brought you here? Kind of a discussion. And it's crazy how many people now are taking trips just to come to Birmingham for its food scene. And I would
Yeah.
never have thought that, but you hear it more and more often.
Andrew Zimmern, Andrew from, he's got a new article out in his magazine about Birmingham that is basically telling you to come here, to travel here just for this, just to go to these restaurants that he names, some of which I agree with, some of which I don't. But, and I don't say that to mean that these are bad restaurants or good. I just think one of the things I wanted to impart today was that everybody has their own taste, and there are consensus great places to eat in Birmingham, but there are a ton of really good places to eat.
I just found one of the articles about Andrew, and I didn't realize this, but he had eaten at Eagle Restaurant.
Yeah. One of them is Eagle.
Yeah,
right?
That's fantastic. Well, Wes, let's talk about the dining experience.
Yeah.
For you, whether you're going to fancy and you're dressed like you are, or you've got on a t-shirt, shorts. And I want you to see if you can rank this in order of importance, not restaurants, but the experience. We've got three components as I see it. You've got people, you've got the food, and you've got atmosphere. And to me, they're all very important as part of the dining experience. Can you differentiate which is more important to you, or what is important to you as part of that experience?
I think all three of those things are very important, and I probably couldn't rank them. I would say, and TJ Segrist, my law partner, will call me a snob for saying this, but if I'm going to a nice restaurant, I want to wear a blazer and a collared shirt and show the same respect I do when I go to church, I just think it's about that experience. I wouldn't go to a restaurant and when I see somebody, like I was at Cafe DuPont a couple of weeks ago, and I'll go off on a tangent about Cafe DuPont in just a second, but there's people there in blue jeans and t-shirts. That's a pet peeve of mine. The experience of eating there is the wait staff and the maitre d' and Chris coming out and talking to you, and the food. So those three, and then the people you're with, and those three things together make that place close to my one of my favorite places to eat in town.
And for those of you who don't know, it's a white tablecloth fine dining downtown. It's been there for many years. Chris is a disciple of Frank's kitchen. And it is, I agree with you. It's a mindset. It is, if I'm going to go and have that type of a meal, I know I'm going to have a fantastic dinner there. But you're right. I don't want to see people in shorts or flip-flops or jeans. I mean, I know that certain restaurants do have dress codes, but others, they just want butts in the seats. And I get it.
Well, and it's really the other thing about DuPont, which I'll say, he's left. Chris has left the restaurant, and he's left it in really good hands with Chris Evans, his sous chef. It's the same menu basically. He's moved back to New Orleans and opening a restaurant down there. But the unknown thing about DuPont, and I know there are other places like that will make it more enjoyable for you, is that they allow you to bring your own wine. They'll charge you a corkage fee. Yeah. And they'll do a tasting menu for you. If you don't really know what you want, they'll load you up and charge you for it. And that can be a great way if you have people out of town, or to introduce them to that kind of fine dining. But that's just a plug for Chris Evans in his new business at Cafe DuPont. So,
Wes, going back to the three components of dining, it regardless if you're going to get pita and Mediterranean food at Purple Onion, or if you're going to go get some barbecue on the south side, or one of these fine dining places. I truly do agree that atmosphere, food, and people are the three best components. But the fourth, to me, and you just mentioned it, is when the proprietor or the chef of the house comes around and checks on you and wants to know what you like, what did you not like, good to see you again. That's such an added touch. I think that some
Yeah.
restaurants just get away from that, or that's just not part of their makeup.
Well, I think Chris DuPont obviously came from New Orleans, and that's kind of a thing in New Orleans. And I went to college with Chris, and whenever I would have out of town guests come in and we would go there, he came out to see us and ask us about each dish, that we were eating. And it's always impressive for the owner and chef to come out and talk to you. So it's a really good way of, and there's some places that I won't mention in town that are high up on the list, and they don't do that. So, in fact, they do the opposite. So
we need you in and out.
Yeah.
More sittings. But Wes, we were at Ovenberg recently, and Chris Hastings is very well known for doing this. We ended up having a 15-minute conversation with him. He didn't know us from anyone else, but he was just so personable. He told us about the changing of the menu based on the seasons, what they're looking at. I mean, that brings you back to a restaurant, makes you a fan, and then you want to bring other friends and family to experience it. I think that is just such part of the dining experience that makes it better.
Right. It's hard to post. I say post. I mean, with COVID, the staffing shortages, and you have to be patient when you go out to eat now.
You really
because
do. You really do.
There's not wait staff running around, with nothing to do. There's always a shortage.
Yeah.
And so I would say when you're going to fine dining, to be patient and to tip your staff for good service and tip them well, and ask questions. Good grief. Everybody wants to go and think they know what they're talking about. It reminds me of Barney Fife ordering steak and green beans at the French restaurant,
Love it. Love it.
So Barney ordered snails and something else, and Andy said, I just want a steak and green beans. So everything I talk about goes back to Andy Griffith, by the way.
That's right. And as it should. Guys, I'm talking with Wes Hughes, an attorney friend, but he's so much more. We're talking about Birmingham's now known food scene. And for the size of our city and community, we have, I wouldn't say shockingly, we have a pleasantly large number of very nice restaurants, all ranges of prices, all ranges of types of food that's offered. And Wes, I want to talk about Pizitz Food Hall for just a minute.
Sure.
For those of you who don't know or never visited, it's somewhere between 12 and 15 different types of small restaurants. It's a food hall. It's a large street level facility where they took it over and made booths. But you can get, or you used at different times, you could get Indian food, Ethiopian food, Israeli food, Vietnamese. A New York deli is moving in there this summer. Oh, where the poke bowls. What am I missing? I know that there's been many over the last several years. It's been very popular location.
Yeah, I know the cheese place.
Yeah. Cheese
and just the bar, and just as a popular gathering place, it's pretty fun. So
Alabama biscuits, coffee. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but my point is, it's a unique facility right in the heart of downtown Birmingham, and it's great for folks who work and live downtown because it's so convenient because you have all of those choices. I tried the Ethiopian food a couple of times for the very first time, and it blew me away. I thought it was fantastic. I'm sorry that it's gone, but I guess there wasn't a big enough market for it. Wes, what about Korean barbecue? I've recently discovered a place down in the Inverness area. Are you familiar with Korean barbecue here in town? It was
I,
a pleasant surprise.
I've watched a lot of it on television, but I'm not familiar with the places here. So, um, but I'm certain it's really good, knowing what goes into it.
Well, then you and we're going to have to make a time and a
Yeah.
date. We're going to go. That's for sure.
Um, as I said, we were talking the other night about Italian restaurants, and my opinion of Italian food is really the simpler the better. And I am a huge fan of. Nobody would ever think, oh, if you're going to eat Italian food, where do you want to go? And I always say Salvatore's Pizza and Pasta is is my favorite Italian place. But
Which has been in business in Birmingham for probably 30 years now.
Yeah, the restaurant itself closed, but the pizza and pasta still goes, and that's just it's Southern Italian, as Livia Soprano said in The Sopranos. She goes, "Oh, Northern."
That's right. That's right.
Some people don't like Northern, yeah, but if you want Neapolitan, I think Batola is also just a fantastic place for that Neapolitan pizza. And
what's so cool about Birmingham is there's so many pockets of our metro area, and I know that restaurants tend to clutter together for the obvious reason, but you can find a Cuban restaurant in Avondale that's been there for a long, long time, or you can drive down 280 next to the Salvatores and find Ellie's Jerusalem Deli next to each other. And I just think that that's kind of a cool thing about the city of Birmingham. You don't have to just go to one place. There's just pockets everywhere.
Right. Some of those are historically related. That's where the immigrant groups moved and they stayed there that long. But yeah, I don't think you can separate Birmingham from its historic past in terms of, its founding and how it was developed and how it evolved through the 20th century. So,
there's a few restaurants I bet when you were growing up that are long gone, but I bet they were favorites of either you, your family, or community. Connie Kanakis, that was here for a long time. Joy Young's, Michael's Steak Restaurant, which was downtown, then moved. That's just three that come off the top of my head. Do you have any other childhood or younger days favorites that are gone, but you wish would come back in some way?
Well, there was the Inslee Grill. In downtown Inslee, there was Leo's Seafood, which everybody called Leo's Seafood, but it was actually the Leo's family. You notice there was never an apostrophe after Leo.
They had to southernize it,
Yeah.
They had to make it fit.
There were places that used to advertise on TV. There was the Gold Nugget in Homewood. Just the old school, and probably the only really remaining old school restaurant is the Bright Star, of course, in Bessemer.
I was just getting ready to go there. I think it may be the oldest continual restaurant either in the state or at least in the metro area. It's got to be over 100 years old.
Yeah, and to eat in that dining room there is like, there's a place in San Francisco, and I'm not trying to be snobby. There's this place, Tadich Grill in downtown San Francisco. It's that dining room and the Bright Star dining room are the same place. They're both that 1900 whatever.
I was going to say, well, the
founding.
murals that are on the walls at the Bright Star just immediately take you back to a time period that you just do not see in more modern restaurants. The last topic I want to hit, Wes, before we get out of here is I know you do a lot of traveling. You mentioned San Francisco, New Orleans, etc. you for someone who's not been to Birmingham, for somebody who's not familiar with our dining scene, to me, Birmingham either stacks up with some of those cities, or as you mentioned earlier, is just one notch below. But I truly believe that some of these better known quality restaurants in town would do equally well in those bigger cities. I just think
Yeah.
it's just such that quality.
Yeah,
And that's what I was going to
I was
ask
going to say,
your observations of that.
I'm not an expert. I mean, I don't think I've ever had a better meal than I've had in Birmingham. So, um, I'm not going to pitch which one it is, and I probably couldn't tell you which one it is, but and I haven't eaten at Michelin starred restaurants in other places, but um, you know, people will come here and they will have had that experience, and they will not be able to distinguish. Um, you have the best restaurant in America in 2018, James Beard, sitting downtown at 5 Points South. It doesn't get any better than that. You can't take that away from Frank Stitt and what he's done, making a French restaurant with a Southern influence. And it's just, and then you take Chris Hastings and what he's done, and his is sort of the Southern restaurant with the technique, kind of the opposite, I guess, not the opposite, but a different take from Frank. So I just think, those places that we've mentioned are just, they're really, really good. And there's so many more that you could name and talk about. We could sit here for hours.
The other thing I was going to add to that is some of these restaurants have a surprisingly well stocked wine selections,
right?
Fun drinks, adult beverages that you can pair. But anyway, I know that Wes, you and I could talk about this, and we will when we get offline as well, about where's the next place to go. Where's the next? I'm not going to ask you to name further restaurants, but what type of food? If I'm coming to Birmingham and I've not been to the food scene here, what type of foods besides barbecue would you recommend that people look for? What's some of your favorite types of foods in the Birmingham scene?
I think the newer places are the newer, more ethnic places that you like, the ones you mentioned. There's a place I went to, and I'm naming a place, but it's gosh, I can't think of the name of it. Cayo Coco Rum and Restaurant. It's a Havana inspired restaurant that is owned by the people who own the Collins Bar. Same ownership.
Yeah.
But it was really good, and really from the atmosphere to the food to the people there. But I guess it's more the traditional Southern flavors that are combined with the traditional techniques that really separate Birmingham from a lot of places. And those are, clearly influenced by Frank Stitt and Chris Hastings and DuPont, those folks.
It's like you give an adage. It's kind of like the coaching tree, Coach Saban's coaching tree, which is Frank Stitt's chef tree, if you will. But my one criticism of Birmingham, there's been many attempts, and we may just not have the population to support it, is a traditional New York deli.
Yeah.
We've had several attempts over the years, and another one is coming downtown this summer, and I'm anxious to see if they can meet my Reuben standard. We'll see.
Maybe you should open that place.
Oh, I have enough sense not to do that. But if you follow me on social, since January, I've been in search of the perfect Reuben and hadn't quite gotten there yet. But I think a New York deli, if one could ever establish itself, that would be an added bonus to the Birmingham metro area. Well,
Cool.
Wes, I want to thank you for hanging out with us today and just running through some of the food scene that Birmingham has to offer. I knew that you would be the perfect fit for today to this conversation and topic. So thank you, bud.
Great. Let's do it again.
Oh, we will in about 5 minutes when we get offline. We're going to figure out
Okay.
what we're going to dinner. But guys, I want to thank you for, as we do every week, we have interesting conversations with people in their areas of expertise. Now, Wes will tell you he's not an expertise foodie, but the man knows his food. So that's why we had him on today. But every Tuesday at 10 o'clock Central, Nomberg Law Live for about 25, 30 minutes. Thank you guys for the last 5 years of tuning in. We've almost hit 250 shows, and we've enjoyed almost every one of our conversations, including the ones where Brother David comes in for a couple of minutes. But I hope you guys continue to be safe. We'll see you again next week. Y'all take care.